Personality of Godhead gives us our specific bodies and the happiness and distress we achieve. One must, therefore, remain situated as he is and be conducted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead exactly as a blind man is led by a person who has eyes with which to see. It's a very nice statement.
Mhm.
Yeah, we are blind. We blindly go through life engaging in sense gratification. By material means, one cannot avoid happiness and distress unique to his particular body. There are 8,400,000 bodily forms, each destined to enjoy and suffer a certain amount of happiness and distress. This we cannot change, for the happiness and distress are ordained by the Supreme Personality of Godhead in accordance with those decisions, and in accordance with whose decisions we have received our bodies. Since we cannot avoid the plan of the Supreme Godhead, we must agree to be directed by him. But we can't avoid it, so we have to be directed. Just as a blind man is led by a person who has eyes. Under any circumstances, if we remain in the condition allotted to us by the Supreme Lord and follow his instructions, we will become perfect. The main purpose of life is to follow the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. His, it is such instructions that constitute one's religion or occupational duty. In Bhagavad Gita, therefore, Lord Krishna says, Sarvadharmam parityaja, mam ekam saranam vraja. Give up all other engagements. Simply surrender unto me and follow me. Me meaning Krishna. Bhagavad Gita 1866. This process of surrendering by following the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not meant for any particular caste or creed. A Brahmana can surrender, and so can a Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Sudra. Everyone can adopt this process. Yeah, what is the process? Surrender unto the Lord. As stated in this verse, Chakshus man Chakshus mat anda iva niyam ana. One should follow the Lord the way a blind man follows a person who has eyes. If we follow the Supreme Personality Godhead by following the directions he gives in the Vedas and Bhagavad Gita, our lives will be successful. The Lord therefore says, Man manabhava mad bhakto mad yashimam namaskuru mam evaisasi satyam te pratijani priyasame. Very important verse. Of course, always think of me, become my devotee, and offer respect and obeisances unto me. Then you will certainly come back home, back to Godhead. I promise you this because you're my very dear friend. Bhagavad Gita, 1865. This instruction is meant for everyone. Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra. If anyone from any division of life surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and follows his instructions, his life will be successful. The previous verse has given the analogy of bulls moving under the direction of the driver of a bullock cart. The bulls, being completely surrendered to the driver, remain wherever he wants to place them and eat whatever he wants them to eat. Similarly, being completely surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we should not aspire for happiness or regret distress. We must be satisfied with the position allotted to us by the Lord. Very, very profound statement. We should follow the path of devotional service and not be dissatisfied with the happiness and distress he has given. People in the material modes of passion and ignorance generally cannot understand the plan of the Lord, the plan of the Supreme Personality of Godhead with its 8,400,000 forms of life. But the human form affords one the special privilege to understand this plan, engage in devotional service, and elevate oneself to the highest position of perfection by following the Lord's instructions. The entire world is working under the influence of the modes of material nature, especially ignorance and passion. But if people engage in hearing and chanting about the glories of the Supreme Lord, their lives can be successful and they can be elevated to the highest perfection in the Brihan Naradiya Purana. Therefore, it is said, Harinama, Harinama, Harinameva Kevalam, Kalo Nasteva, Nasteva, Nasteva Gatiranyata. In this age of Kali, there is no other way, no other way, no other way for spiritual perfection than the holy name, the holy name, the holy name of the Lord. Everyone should be given the chance to hear the holy names of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For thus, one will gradually come to understand his real position in life and be elevated to the transcendental position above the mode of goodness. Thus, all impediments to his progress will be cut to pieces. In conclusion, therefore, we must be satisfied in whatever position we have been put into by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and we should try to engage ourselves in his devotional service. Then our lives will be successful. This is very, very good advice. And the verse, Harinama, Harinama, Harinameva Kevalam, Kalo, Nasteva, 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 Gataranyata. In this age of Kali, there is no other way, no other way, no other way for spiritual perfection than the holy name and the holy name, than the holy name, the holy name, the holy name of the Lord. So it's repeated 3 times. So whenever something is repeated 3 times, it means it is of utmost importance that one should follow and be cognizant of and not ignore. So the problem is that most people do not follow the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is such instructions that constitute one's religion or occupational duty. So the process of surrendering by following the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not meant for any particular caste or creed. In other words, it's meant for everyone. A Brahmana can surrender, and so can a Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Sudra. Everyone can adopt this process. As stated in this verse, Chaksus mat anda eva niyamuna. One should follow the Lord the way a blind man follows a person who has eyes. If we follow the Supreme Personality of Godhead by following the directions He gives in the Vedas and Bhagavad Gita, our lives will be successful. And then, Manmanabhava Madbhaktu Madhyajimam Namaskuru Mam Vaisi Satyante Pratijani Priyosime. Always think of me, Krishna says. Become my devotee and offer respect and obeisances unto me. Then you will certainly come back home, back to Godhead. I promise you this because you are my very dear friend. This is Bhagavad Gita 1865. This instruction is meant for everyone, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra. If anyone from any division of life surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and follows his instructions, his life will be successful. Okay, so here's the formula for success in life. And we should be interested in what is real success and what is a will o' the wisp nonsense, so-called success. Real success is being trained to go back to Godhead. Everything else is not success. Everything else is eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. That is not going to take us back to Godhead. However, if we surrender to Krishna completely and follow his instructions completely, then we have a good chance of going back to Godhead in this lifetime. So, there's a major statement here. People in the material modes of passion and ignorance generally cannot understand the plan of the Supreme Personality of Godhead with its 8,400,000 forms of life. But the human form affords one the special privilege to understand this plan, engage in devotional service, and elevate oneself to the highest position of perfection by following the Lord's instructions. Many people think that there's no plan, that everything is happening haphazardly. That's not a fact. The Lord has a plan. And it says, people in the material modes of passion and ignorance generally cannot understand the plan of the Supreme Personality Godhead with its 8,400,000 forms of life. But the human form affords one the special privilege to understand this plan, engage in devotional service, and elevate oneself to the highest position of perfection by following the Lord's instructions. Well, that's the plan. It's to become elevated to the highest position of Krishna consciousness and follow the plan of the Lord. What is the plan of the Lord? That everyone should come back to Godhead. Why? Because we all were originally with Krishna, but due to corrupted desires, of course, we're free to desire what we want. Because of corruption of our desires, we left the Lord voluntarily. But now we have a chance to come back to the Lord and live a pure life of Krishna consciousness. So that's why it says people in the material modes with modes of passion and ignorance generally cannot understand the plan of the Supreme Personality of Godhead with its 8,400,000 forms of life. But the human form affords one the special privilege to understand this plan, engage in devotional service, and elevate oneself to the highest position of perfection by following the Lord's instructions. The entire world is working under the influence of the modes of material nature, especially ignorance and passion. But if people engage in hearing and chanting about the glories of the Supreme Lord, their lives can be successful and they can be elevated to the highest perfection. In the Brihan Naradiya Purana, therefore, it is said, Harir Nama, Harir Nameva Kevalam, Kalo Nasteva Katranyatai. In this age of Kali, there's no other way for spiritual perfection than the holy name, the holy name, the holy name of the Lord. So, as we said before, when something is repeated 3 times in Sanskrit tradition, it means it is of utmost importance. That means there's no other way to attain spiritual perfection than the holy name, the holy name, the holy name of the Lord. Therefore, everyone should be given a chance to hear the holy names of the Supreme Personality Godhead, for thus one will gradually come to understand his real position in life. What is our real position in life? Our real position in life should be to surrender completely to the Lord and engage in devotional service and always offer our homage and our love for the Supreme Personality Godhead through engagement in devotional service to the Lord every day and every minute of life. That should be, that will help us to gradually come to understand our real position in life and be elevated to the transcendental position above the mode of goodness. That means that we become free from the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance, and we attain the transcendental goodness in life. So all the impediments to progress will be cut to pieces. In conclusion, therefore, we must be satisfied in whatever position we have been put into by the Supreme Personality Godhead, and we should try to engage ourselves in His devotional service. Then our lives will be successful. There it is. Very, very profound and practical knowledge of how to be successful in this life. Success is not how much money you have, or how much sex you have, or how many properties you have, and how many degrees you have. Success is being completely surrendered to the Lord and engaged in devotional service to the Lord. It's not, the success is not counted by how many PhDs you have, or how much money you have, or how popular you are. No, it all depends on how much you have love for Krishna. And you manifest that love by devotional service in the association of devotees. And here it is said, everyone should be given a chance to hear the holy names of the Supreme Personality Godhead. For thus, one will gradually come to understand his real position in life and be elevated to the transcendental position above the mode of goodness. So we come eventually to transcendental goodness. Thus, all impediments to his progress will be cut to pieces. And in conclusion, therefore, we must be satisfied in whatever position we have been put into by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and we should try to engage ourselves in his devotional service. Then our lives will be successful. Yeah, We are all put into different situations of life due to previous karma, but we should uh, not be discouraged in any way. However, we should be engaged in the devotional service of the Lord from whatever position we are in, and maintain our love and devotion for the Lord through devotional service, and then we can be liberated from the cycle of birth and death. Therefore, it says, therefore, we must be satisfied in whatever position we have been put into by the Supreme Personality Godhead, and we should try to engage ourselves in his devotional service. Then our lives will be successful. There it is, our takeaway for today. Very profound statements in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 1, Text 15. Text 16. Even if one is liberated, he nevertheless accepts the body he has received according to his past karma. Without misconceptions, however, he regards his enjoyment as suffering due to that karma, the way an awakened person regards a dream he had while sleeping. He thus remains steadfast and never works to achieve another material body under the influence of the three modes of material nature. This is a very nice verse. Purport. The difference between a liberated and conditioned soul is that the conditioned soul is under the concept of bodily life, whereas a liberated person knows that he is not the body, but spirit, different from the body. Priyavrata might have thought that although a conditioned soul is forced to act according to the laws of nature, why should he, who was far advanced in spiritual understanding, accept the same kind of bondage and impediments to spiritual advancement? Very good question. To answer this doubt, Lord Brahma informed him that even those who are liberated do not resent accepting in the present body the results of their past activities. While sleeping, one dreams many unreal things, but when he awakens, he discards them and makes progress in factual life. Similarly, a liberated person, one who has completely understood that he is not the body, but a spirit soul, disregards the past activities performed in ignorance and performs his present activities in such a way that they produce no reactions. In other words, no karma or akarma. This is described in Bhagavad Gita 3.9. Yajnartat karmano nyatra loko yam karma bandhana. If one performs activities for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality, the Yajna Purusha, his work does not produce reactions. Yeah, you don't have any karma if you're only engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. Or as it says, Yajnartat karmanonyatra lokuyam karma bandhana. If one performs activities for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Yajna Purusha, his work does not produce reactions. There it is. Whereas karmis who act for themselves and are bound by reactions of their work, whereas karmis who act for themselves are bound by the reactions of their work. A liberated person, therefore, does not think about whatever he has ignorantly done in the past. Instead, he acts in such a way that he will not produce another body by fruitive activities. As clearly mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, Mam chayo vipicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunam samatityaitam brahmabhuyaya kalpate. Very important verse. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. Bhagavad Gita 14:26. Regardless of what we have done in our past lives, if we engage ourselves in unalloyed devotional service to the Lord in this life, we will always be situated in the Brahma Bhuta liberated state. Brahma Bhuta prasanatma chatina kamstati samaksarve sabhute surmad bhaktim labhate param. Free from reactions and will not be obliged to accept another material body. Tyakva deham punarjanma naitimam eti sarjana. Bhagavad Gita 4.9. After giving up the body, one who has acted in that way does not accept another material body, but instead goes back home, back to Godhead. Okay, so Tyakvadeham Punarjanma, Naitimam Eti Sarjana, Bhagavad Gita 4.9, means that if we engage ourselves in unalloyed devotional service to the Lord in this life, we will always be situated in the Brahma Bhuta liberated state, free from reactions, and will not be obliged to accept another material body. Tyatvadeham punarjanma naitimam eti sarjana. Bhagavad Gita 4.9. After giving up the body, one who has acted in that way, meaning in devotional service, does not accept another material body, but instead goes back home, back to Godhead. Okay, there's the formula for real success in human life. Text 17. Even if one goes from forest to forest, one who is not self-controlled must always fear material bondage because he is living with 6 co-wives. Wow. The mind and knowledge acquiring senses, even householder life, however, cannot harm a self-satisfied, learned man who has conquered his senses. That's a very interesting statement. Sri Narottam Das Thakur, purport, Sri Narottam Das Thakur Asam. Grihe va vanate take, ha goranga vale dake. Nice poetry. Whether one is situated in the forest or at home, if he is engaged in the devotional service of Lord Chaitanya, he is a liberated person. Okay, so everything depends on devotional service to the Lord, meaning Lord Chaitanya. Here, this is also repeated. For one who has not controlled his senses, going to the forest to become a so-called yogi is meaningless because his uncontrolled mind and senses are going with him. He cannot achieve anything, even by giving up household life and staying in the forest. Yeah, you have to purify the mind. And the only way to purify the mind is by constantly chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. Formerly, many mercantile men, meaning people interested only in making money, mercantile men from the up country of India. I like that. Up country of India used to go to Bengal, and thus there is a familiar saying: if you go to Bengal, your fortune will go with you. Okay, well, that has two, let's say, it has uh, that has a well, in other words, just because you go to Bengal doesn't mean you have achieved perfection, because whatever nonsense you have done in the past will go with you if you are not engaged in devotional service. Therefore, if you go to Bengal, your fortune will go with you. Our first concern, therefore, should be to control the senses. And since the senses cannot be controlled unless engaged in devotional service to the Lord, our most important duty. Now, okay, now this is a very important statement. Our most important duty is to engage the senses in devotional service. Rishikena, Rishikesha, Devanam Bhakti Uchite. Bhakti, or devotional service, means engagement of the purified senses in the service of the Lord. Well, how do we purify our senses so that our service in the devotional service to the Lord is, let's say, valid? Well, we have to always be chanting Hare Krishna and following the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness strictly. So, Rishikesha, Sevanam Bhakti Uchite. Bhakti, or devotional service, means engagement of the purified senses in the service of the Lord. Well, how do we purify the senses? That is engagement, always engagement in the senses, or the service of engaging engaging the senses in the service of the Lord. But we need to have a bona fide spiritual master. We cannot do it without a bona fide spiritual master. It's very essential. Then we have the blessings of Lord Krishna, and we can have a spiritual life. Without guru, bona fide guru, we will be misled very easily due to ignorance. So there's no such thing as the devil, but there is such a thing as ignorance. So we should be very concerned about having spiritual knowledge to overcome all the ignorance that is in this world. That's why it says, Hishikena, Hishikesha, Sevanam Bhakti Uchite. Bhakti means engagement of the purified senses in the service of the Lord. Herein, Brahma indicates that instead of going to the forest with uncontrolled senses, it is better and more secure to engage the senses in the service of the Lord. Even household life can do no harm to a self-controlled person acting in this way. It cannot force him into material bondage. Srila Rupa Goswami has further enunciated this position. Iha yasya harir dasye karmanamana salajira nikilasvasu api avastasu jivan mukta sauchite. Regardless of one's circumstances, if one fully engages his activities, mind and words in the devotional service of the Lord, he should be understood to be a liberated person. Now that does not depend on being a Brahmana or a Kshatriya or Vaishya or Sudra. It depends on being a devotee, devoted completely to the service of the Lord. Bhaktivinoda Thakur was a responsible officer and a householder Yet his service to the cause of expanding the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is unique. Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati Thakur says, Durdantan Kala Sarpa Patali Prok Kata Damstrate. The sense organs are certainly our greatest enemies, and they are therefore compared to venomous serpents. However, if a venomous serpent is bereft of its poison fangs, it is no longer fearful. Well, how does that happen? You have to break the fangs of the serpent, and then the serpent can't put his fangs and put poison into your body. So there's a way of breaking the fangs of the poisonous snake. Experts know how to grab the head of the snake and force the snake to bite into some hard thing, uh, like a rock or something else, and break the teeth of the snake, so that it cannot inject the poison into the body of a man. If it no longer has those fangs, the two fangs, if they're broken, and there's a way that expert snake uh, persons, uh, persons who deal with snakes know how to break the fangs of the snake so that it cannot inject poison into the body of a human being. But you have to be an expert to do it. You have to have the experience to be able to grab the head of the snake and force it to try and bite into, let's say, a stone or something. And of course, its fangs will be broken by doing that. It's by grabbing the snake on the back of its head and squeezing it so much that the snake opens its mouth, and then you put it into a stone or some very hard surface and basically break its fangs. Don't try and do it unless you're been trained to do it. It's very dangerous because snakes are very fast and their fangs are very, very sharp. But there are people who know how to, uh, let's say, either charm the snake or wrestle the snake into the position where they can break the fangs. Similarly, if the senses are engaged in the service of the Lord, there is no need to fear their activities. Just like if you break the fangs of the snake, there's no reason to be afraid of them anymore. Similarly, if the senses, which are compared to snakes with fangs, are engaged in the service of the Lord, there is no need to fear their activities. The devotees in the Krishna consciousness movement move within this material world, but because their senses are fully engaged in the service of the Lord, they are always aloof from the material world. They are always living in a transcendental position. All right, well, what does that mean, transcendental position? They transcend all the nonsense of mundane life and completely uh, engage in devotional service to the Lord without any material desires. Their only desires are to please the Lord and by engaging in the devotional service of the Lord under the control and tutelage of a bona fide spiritual master or masters. You can have more than one spiritual, uh, let's say, teacher. You're not obliged to be only to one teacher. You can have several or more teachers in Krishna consciousness. Text 18. One who is situated in household life and who systematically conquers his mind and five sense organs is like a king in his fortress who conquers his powerful enemies. Uh, who are his powerful enemies? Lust, anger, and greed. After one has been trained in household life and his lusty desires have decreased, he can move anywhere without danger. What is the training in household life? That is controlling the senses and the mind by always keeping them engaged in devotional service with the help and guidance of bona fide gurus. And I use the word with plural uh, because you should not say, "Well, I only listen to this one guru. I don't listen to any other guru." No, you should listen to all bona fide gurus who all have the same teaching. That is, surrender to Krishna through devotional service. Therefore, you will have uh, uh, gurus all around you because they are following the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness strictly. If you say, I don't listen to anybody else, only my own guru, well, you are at that point in a, let's say, precarious situation because what if your guru leaves his body? Or whether you hardly ever see your guru? No, it's better to have one initiating guru and several or more instructing gurus in your life. That way, you are protected. The Vedic system of four varnas and four ashramas is very scientific, and its entire purpose is to enable one to control the senses. Before entering household life, grihastha ashram, a student is fully trained to become jitendriya. That's a nice word. A conqueror of the senses. Well, no kids today are really taught to be jitendriya, conquering their senses. Such a mature student is allowed to become a householder. And because he was first trained in conquering his senses, he retires from household life and becomes vanaprastha as soon as the strong waves of youthful life are past and he reaches the verge of old age at 50 years or slightly more. Yeah, when we become 50 years old or slightly more, we should give up all sense gratification, all, let's say, mundane engagements, and be fully engaged in Krishna consciousness. Then, after being further trained, he accepts sannyasa. He is then a fully learned and renounced person who can move anywhere and everywhere without fear of being captivated by material desires. The senses are considered very powerful enemies. As a king in a strong fortress can conquer powerful enemies, so a householder in Grihastha ashram, household life, can conquer the lusty desires of youth and be very secure when he takes vanaprastha and sannyasa. Well, vanaprastha means you and your wife give up house and home and go on parikrama and going to different holy places, and not simply to take a bath in the sacred river, but most importantly to associate with genuine Vaishnavas or exalted devotees and take their guidance. It's not that you go to all the holy places just to take a bath. That's not the purpose. You go to holy places to meet the elevated gurus and take instructions from them how to control your mind and senses and be engaged always in the devotional service of Krishna. Okay, so text number 19. Lord Brahma continued, my dear Priyavrata, seek shelter inside the opening in the lotus of the feet of the Lord. That's nice. Seek shelter inside the opening in the lotus of the feet of the Lord, whose navel is also like a lotus. Thus, conquer the six sense organs, that is, the mind and knowledge acquiring senses. Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, etc. The six organs of knowledge acquiring senses. Accept material enjoyment because the Lord extraordinarily has ordered you to do so. You will thus always be liberated from material association and be able to carry out the Lord's orders in your constitutional position. Well, what is our constitutional position? We are all subordinate to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, we should accept all the teachings of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Well, let's look at this. Let me make sure I didn't misread it. Lord Brahma continued, my dear Priyavrata, seek shelter inside the opening in the lotus of the feet of the Lord. Okay, yeah, there's a little bit of an opening between the toes of the feet of the Lord, whose navel is also like a lotus. Thus conquer the six sense organs, the mind and knowledge acquiring senses. The mind and also eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, in other words, the knowledge acquiring senses. Accept material enjoyment because the Lord extraordinarily has ordered you to do so. You will thus always be liberated from material association. Now, someone might say, wait a minute. I thought that accepting material enjoyment is a bad thing. Well, not necessarily if it is enjoyment of Krishna conscious activities, then it is a good thing. But if you accept mundane happiness of lusty desires of sex and meat eating and gambling and intoxication, that is a very, very bad thing. But if you accept the path of Krishna consciousness, where there's chanting, dancing, and feasting, that's a good thing. So you're not supposed to be miserable all the time and engaged in self inflicted misery. You should learn to be happy in Krishna consciousness and have nice prashad, nice association, and always hearing Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam and engaging in Sankirtan, etc. So you're actually a happy person. You're not miserable. So accept material enjoyment. Yeah, with our senses, we are engaging in devotional service. So there is material enjoyment, but it's enjoyment that is directed toward pleasing Krishna in this lifetime with our mind and senses and our body by engaging them in everything in Krishna's service. Therefore, it says, accept material enjoyment because the Lord extraordinarily has ordered you to do so. You will thus always be liberated from material association and be able to carry out the Lord's orders in your constitutional position. So you're not meant to be miserable, to engage in self-destructive tapasya. That is not good. But you should be happy and have enjoyment in Krishna consciousness by chanting, dancing, and feasting. So someone might say, well, no, I don't want to have any material enjoyment. Well, you'll go crazy if you don't have any material enjoyment. But if that material enjoyment is Krishna conscious activity, then you'll be very happy. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. There are three kinds of men within this material world. Those who are trying to enjoy the senses to the utmost are called karmis. Above them are the jnanis who try to conquer the urges of the senses. And above them are the yogis who have already conquered the senses. None of them, however, are situated in a transcendental position. Very profound statement. Only devotees who belong to none of the above mentioned groups are transcendental. As explained in Bhagavad Gita 14:26, very good verse. Wait a minute. Opening this page. As explained in Bhagavad Gita 14:26, Mam Chayo Vibichari na Bhakti Yogena Sevate Sagunan Samatitya Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, very important, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman, meaning Brahman means pure devotional service. Lord Brahma herein advises Priyavata to remain transcendental in the fortress, not of family life, but the lotus feet of the Lord, Abja Navangrihi Saroja. When a bumblebee enters the opening of a lotus flower and drinks its honey, it is fully protected by the petals of the lotus. The bee is undisturbed by sunshine and other external influences. Similarly, one who always seeks shelter at the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead is protected from all dangers. It is therefore said in Srimad Bhagavatam 10:14-58, Samasritaye padapalava plavam, mahat padam punya yaso murare, bhavam buddhir vatsapadam param padam yat vipadam nate sam. It's a very famous verse, 10:14-58. For one who has taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, everything becomes easier. Indeed, even crossing the great ocean of nescience, meaning ignorance, bhavam buddhi, is exactly like crossing the hoof print created by a calf, vatsapadam. In other words, for a devotee, all the difficulties in material life are reduced to the hoof prints of a animal, like the hoof print of the animal, is relatively small compared to the material world. So all the miseries of material life are reduced to the hoof print of an animal. And it says here, indeed, even crossing the great ocean of nescience, meaning ignorance, Bhavambudi, is exactly like crossing the hoof print created by a calf. Well, the hoof print created by a calf is small, but the trying to pass a raging, uh, let's say, river, that is very difficult. In fact, almost impossible. But all of that raging river is reduced to the water that's held in the hoof print of a calf. For such a devotee, there's no question of remaining in a place where every step is dangerous. Yeah, so you don't go to uh, let's say, a brothel, where there's sex toys and women and drinking liquor and so forth. So a devotee never enters a house uh, of iniquitous or bad behavior where people are engaged in sense gratification. He always stays in the association of devotees, even to the point where if he has to go outside the temple, he always goes with another devotee. He tries not to go out individually. Why? Because individually he might fall down. In the association of another mixed up devotee, even if you begin to be attracted by Maya, he will help you to uh, not be so enamored by nonsense and warn you, uh-oh, don't do this anymore. You're going off the track. It's just like a choo-choo train that goes off track and then it completely falls apart because it's no longer on the two rails of the track. You see, there are two rails, and if you stay on the two rails, you go to the uh, desired place that you're desiring to go to. But if the rails are broken, then you never finish your trajectory because the two rails have been broken. So the two rails are Guru and Krishna. If you always stay in association of Guru and Krishna, you have no problem. Our actual duty is to carry out the supreme order of the personality of God. If we are fixed in our determination to carry out the supreme order of the Lord, we are always secure, regardless of where we are situated, whether in hell or in heaven. Yeah, for devotee, you can be in hell or you can be in heaven. He continually engages in devotional service to the Lord. So therefore is not influenced by the mundane uh, issues of life. Herein the words Prakritim Rajasva are very significant. Prakritim refers to one's constitutional position. Now let's understand what that means. What does constitutional mean? It means basically what you are really meant to do in life. What are we really meant to do? We should engage in devotional service to the Lord. That is our constitutional position. We are made by God to be engaged in the service of the Lord. Therefore, we have senses, we have mind, we have legs, we have eyes, all these things. They're all meant for engagement in devotional service. But if we use them in the engagement of nonsense, then we become corrupted and we will not reach the desired position of being liberated. However, if we use these very powerful instruments that are given to us, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, and body, etc., in the service of Krishna, then we achieve the real purpose of life, going back to Godhead. But we can, at the same time, use those senses and the mind in sense gratification. We would go to hell. And it's not a nice place, hell. Okay, every living entity has the constitutional position of being an eternal servant of God. That's what it means by constitutional position, being a servant of God. Therefore, Lord Brahma advised Priyavata, be situated in your original position as an eternal servant of the Lord. Now, see, that's a very important statement. That means that we were all originally with Krishna. But due to the fact that we have limited free will, now what does that mean, limited free will? It means you're limited to two desires that you want to fulfill. Either you're limited to being engaged in sense gratification, or you're limited to be engaged always in devotional services. So you have two choices, always in being in Krishna consciousness or always being in the association of nonsense people and engaged in sense gratification. Being situated in your original position as an eternal servant to the Lord, if you carry out his orders, you will never fall, even in the midst of material enjoyment. Material enjoyment achieved by dint of one's fruitive activities differs from the material enjoyment given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay, so now we see there are two types of happiness, happiness in Krishna consciousness or happiness in sense gratification. We should choose the happiness of Krishna consciousness and avoid the happiness of sense gratification, where we ignore Krishna and simply use our senses with wanton, disgusting activities. A devotee sometimes appears to be a very opulent person. Uh, it sometimes appears to be in a very opulent position, but he accepts that position as to follow the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, a devotee is never affected by material influences. Yeah, you might be blessed to be in a very opulent position, but you don't forget Krishna. You use that opulence in the service of Krishna. Therefore, you're not influenced by it. But if you become puffed up and use that opulence for sense gratification, now you become a donkey, and you're going to ruin your life by engaging in unending types of sense gratification. The devotees in the Krishna consciousness movement are preaching all over the world in accordance with the order of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They have to meet many karmis, but by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they are unaffected by material influences. He has blessed them, as described in Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 7.129. Kabu na Badibe Tomara Vishaya Taranga Punarapi Ei Tani Pabe Mora Sangha Sange Pabe Mora Sange. A sincere devotee who engages in the service of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by preaching his cult all over the world, will never be affected by Vishaya Taranga, material influences. On the contrary, in due course of time, he will return to the shelter of the lotus feet of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and will thus have perpetual association with him. Okay, so I think our time is up. Are there any questions or comments? Questions or comments? Okay, our takeaway for today is the statement of the Srimad Bhagavatam 10:14-58. Samasritaye padapalava plavam mahat padam punya yaso murare bhavam buddhi vatsapadam param padam 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 yat vipadam nate sam. I like it. This is poetry, transcendental poetry. For one who has taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, everything becomes easier. Indeed, even crossing the great ocean of nescience, meaning ignorance, or bhavam buddhi, is exactly like crossing the hoof print created by a calf. In other words, the great ocean of ignorance uh, becomes as small as the hoof print of a calf. So it's easy now to cross over the ocean of nescience or ignorance. Therefore, it says, indeed, even crossing the great ocean of nescience, bhavam buddhi, is exactly like crossing the hoof print created by a calf, vatsapadam. For such a devotee, there's no question of remaining in a place where every step is dangerous. Yeah. If we're not engaged in devotional service, then we may enter a place where there are poisonous snakes all around us and be bitten over and over again by the poison of sense gratification. However, in the association of devotees, we can avoid a place where there are poisonous snakes because now we're in the association of genuine devotees and always chanting and dancing and having nice prasadam and always hearing Bhagavad Gita and being free from lust, anger, and greed, the three doors to hell. Okay, so therefore, a sincere devotee who engages in the service of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by preaching his cult all over the world will never be affected by Vishaya Taranga, material influences. On the contrary, in due course of time, he will return to the shelter of the lotus feet of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and will have perpetual association with him. In other words, eternal association with Lord Chaitanya, because he has spent his life preaching the cult of Lord Chaitanya all over the world. Therefore, he is never affected by Vishaya Taranga, material influences. Okay, that is our takeaway for today, my dear devotees. Are there any questions or comments? Okay, no questions, no comments. Thank you very much.
But I think in this particular point that you may be having the material opulence, but you are completely using everything in the service of the Lord.
Yeah,
And
you're not affected.
yeah, you're not affected. And I think there was one Prabhupada at one point, he had a picture as of like he's kept holding a lot of wealth. Um, I think I've seen that picture, but where like basically Prabhupada saying like only Mayavadis say as if like oh, I'm rejecting. Whereas a devotee embraces it not for his own sense gratification, but to use it in the service of God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Money is a bad master and a good servant
Servant.
if you use it in Krishna's service.
Yeah.
We should always be cognizant of the dangers in material life and avoid, especially, the association of unholy people. And always seek out the association of saintly people. Then most of our problems will go away. Okay, thank you very much, my dear devotees. And our takeaway today is a sincere devotee who engages in the service of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by preaching his cult all over the world will never be affected by Vishaya Taranga, material influences. On the contrary, in due course of time, he will return to the shelter of the lotus feet of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and will thus have perpetual or eternal association with him. Wow, that's a wonderful statement. And uh, that statement is Kabuna Badibe Tomara Vishaya Taranga Punarapi Eitani Pabe Morasanga. Yeah. We should always stay in the Sangha or the association of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and, and be engaged in preaching his cult all over the world. Then we'll never be affected by Vishaya Taranga, material influences. On the contrary, in due course of time, such a devotee will return to the shelter of the lotus feet of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and will thus have perpetual association with him, meaning being liberated eternally in the association of the Lord. Okay, that is our takeaway for today. Thank you very much, my dear devotees. Please chant Hare Krishna and be happy. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Ram,
Rama
Ram.
Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Hare, Hare Hare. Okay, we'll stop right there and pick it up again tonight. All glory to Srila Prabhupada ki jai.